What was the creepiest / unexplainable / paranormal thing you saw in the middle of the day? It could be anything from glitch in the matrix, otherworldly things, parallel worlds, ghosts playing, etc. My childhood home was massively haunted. A lot of the haunting happened during the day, but here's the one that panicked me the most. I was alone watching my brother. I was around 18, he was 2 or 3, barely talking yet. We were in his playroom, a really brightly lit area downstairs, playing with blocks or something when he suddenly goes from giggling and running around to just dead frozen, staring at the entryway into the room. I ask him what's up, and he just points to our staircase and says, "Icky noise." He'd been pointing and saying that he freaked out randomly for a while now, and I figured it was going to be another time showing him nothing is there, but I finally take a good look at the stairs, and there's something there. Our staircase was mostly surrounded by walls, so I hadn't noticed at first due to shadow, but I could see crouched on the step just below where the wall cut off this pitch black shape of a person. It was literally a slightly fuzzy silhouette of a person made of just pure black, clearly looking at us between the hand railing. It took a step further down toward us, still crouched holding the rails, before my brain processed that I was actually seeing it. I screamed, because what other response are you really going to have to that, grabbed my brother, and hauled us out of the house. We ended up sitting in the backyard playing with my sister's dog while I called my mom and waited for her to get home. Sightings of that thing only got worse before we moved out. When my brother was a bit older, he was able to explain he called it icky noise because whenever it showed up, he could hear this really gross, scary gurgling whispering. I never heard it make noise, but I definitely saw it several times, and it got rid of my idea that daytime was automatically safe real fast. I have a coworker who claims she has the equivalent of a portal in her house where spirits travel. This woman is about as logical as they come, so it surprised me that she believed in stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge ghost show fanatic. She claims that sometimes they follow her to work. I thought nothing of it, it was a casual conversation. One day, I had brought my son to work. She, he, and I were the only people in the store. I was standing on the other side of this closed-off counter area, and to my right I saw a little boy, about my son's height, with blonde hair. I saw just a glimpse of the color of his clothes as he passed between one aisle and another. I yelled to him to ask what he was doing. When he responded, he was sitting on a stool on the other side of the closed counter, saying he was still playing his video game. What was so weird was that, in order for him to have gotten to that aisle on my right, he would have had to come around to the left side of the counter and pass me. Same to get back to his spot. Considering the distance from one location to the other was pretty far, there's no way he could have made the feat in mere seconds. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You just saw him, didn't you? He followed me to work today." She then went on to describe the kid in perfect detail, without any prior knowledge of what I'd noticed about him. I am pretty sure that people who go camping a lot will agree with me that a forest at night is a pretty creepy place. Lots of sounds you couldn't connect to any animal. I usually dismiss them as wind or weird echoes, but about 5 years ago I went camping in the Southern Alps, and I set my tent just inside the tree line. After about 2 days of being there and exploring the nature, hiking, and doing a bit of caving, I started to feel like something was around me. Not like following me, but that something was all around. I thought I was just tired and dehydrated, but when the night fell on the 3rd day and I was lying in my tent, I started to hear branches breaking and leaves moving really unnaturally. It's quite common for branches to break under their own weight or because they were rotten, but when I woke up and checked the trees, there were marks on them at about 15 feet high. Not just one tree but a lot of them. On the 5 trees around my tent there were also scratchings at the same height. I was pretty scared at that point because I had no idea if some local was playing a prank on me or there was something more sinister going on. I had a knife to defend myself, but I quickly packed nonetheless. Being a 5-foot woman that barely weighs 120 pounds, I wasn't going to take any chances. I checked the trees and floor for the last time, and there were no footprints or any disturbed foliage. Which meant that what came on trees didn't touch the ground even once. After I started heading back to the valley, I heard this noise, like a deer mixed with a man's voice. It was so creepy I legit started running downhill. I didn't look back once, and even though I am not religious, I grasped the crucifix that Grandma gave me so hard my palm started to bleed. You have no idea how shitty and fucked up the whole situation was, and the worst thing of all is no one believed me. After asking the locals if there were people living up there or if there was ever anything shady going on, they ignored me and started to avoid eye contact. When I was 12, I was in the middle of a huge Weird Al phase. I found a copy of his new album on cassette, only a month after it had come out, in the used bin at our local Tower Records. This was the middle school equivalent of hitting the lottery, since I could not buy alcohol or tobacco. Or play blackjack. Put a pin in that, kids, there was a time when you had to get up off of your ass to go and get media. It didn't stream to you like a goddamn magic trick, so, with this newfound treasure in hand, I climbed back into the family minivan and carefully stored my find in a specific arm/cubby/alternative glove box. I wanted it safely secreted away for use later at home in my own boombox. Put another pin in that. Has anyone else ever noticed how many goddamn storage places there were tucked away in minivans in the 90s? Anyway, I go to retrieve it a couple hours later and find out that my one copy of this album has doubled. I now have 2 copies. My mom didn't buy one. My sisters didn't buy one. My dad wasn't in the car all day. There was no explanation for it. The album had replicated itself. Looking back, maybe that compartment was magical. I should have left a $50 bill in there and come back after that was replicated, too. So there you go. Magically appearing copies of cassette albums. This was a few years ago now. It was early afternoon, probably around 2 p.m. on a Saturday. My dad and I were standing in the kitchen. I was at the counter, a sort of breakfast bar that is higher than the rest, making a sandwich. He was standing behind me and to the left, in the doorway near the fridge. We were having a discussion about something I can't remember when he stopped mid-sentence. At this moment I look up from my sandwich, and directly to my right is what made him stop speaking, a floor-to-ceiling shadow in a roughly cylindrical shape about 2 feet wide. I immediately turn and face this thing as it swiftly and silently glides straight past me, passing in front of the kitchen window, which it totally obscured the light from, and straight through the wall. I looked at my dad completely speechless but managed to ask if he saw that. He just nodded in response. I walked past him and into the hallway and then went into my parents' room. This thing would have to go through there on its path. Nothing. We spent some time trying to figure out what could have caused a floor-to-ceiling shadow like that. We were entirely stumped, but we've both experienced the paranormal many times before. On an interesting note, this shadow would have passed directly into the master bathroom, having gone through the wall in the kitchen that it did. My dad has seen an apparition of his mother-in-law in the doorway of this bathroom before. He also claims that when he was very young, he would see strange little men, sort of like gnomes, in his parents' house, and they were not always friendly. That house still gives me an uneasy feeling. This is a story I've told many times, and there have been many theories about what the fuck this could have been, but I never got an explanation. I was sitting in geography class, the Netherlands, and just paying attention to the fun class of my awesome teacher. There was one person sitting next to me and 2 other classmates in front of us, all just listening to the teacher, and about 28 other kids in the room scattered around. The teacher asked me a geography question, and I started answering it. The whole fucking class is looking at me. As I am talking about this question, Earth blah blah blah. Climates blah blah blah. You know how it goes. Now here comes the weird shit. The girl in front of me was looking at me as I was talking. Something happened in the empty space between us. At about eye height. Now it is very hard to describe, and I will try to do my best. Out of nothing, this bright white flash, about 10 centimeters in diameter, appears. It makes this weird grinding noise, kind of like when you rub 2 pieces of styrofoam together. It looked nothing like electricity or anything, but it was so strange. The only way I can explain it is that it kind of looked like that scene in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone where Hermione fixes Harry's glasses. Out of her wand comes this thing that kind of looked like it, but smaller. At this point I was like, WTF, am I having a stroke? Now this thing, it happened for everyone to see, right in front of my face. It left behind some smoke too. It moved like it was morphing, if you can understand that. So I fucking froze and asked, WTF, did you guys see that? And the people around me, including my teacher, were like, WTF was that? Everyone in the close vicinity saw it. A very sweet smell emerging from the flash stayed there for weeks after. I always felt strange after that. We were kind of baffled and shrugged it off afterwards. I couldn't sleep that night thinking about what it was. Especially because so many other people witnessed it. Does anyone know what the fuck this could have been? Thank you very much in advance. I'd be happy to answer any questions to clarify stuff. Never did anything else like that happen again. Was an adolescent and went into the woods with a neighborhood friend to investigate the old house. It stood in the middle of an otherwise completely wooded area and was connected to the rest of us only by a poorly kept service road. When we got there, we discovered that the house also had what looked like a one-room school on the property. Through age-glazed windows, we could see the broken chalkboard and rotting desks that kids once used. The schoolhouse had a cellar that opened via large doors chained over. We tried pulling on the handles to see if we could somehow open them but gave up. After a while, we landed on just planning some general vandalism, but then it happened. Those damn cellar doors exploded open, throwing the chain aside, paused at the apex of their opening, and slammed shut seemingly faster than they had opened. Yep, I shit myself. He and I took off running. Through the woods. Once we emerged in the neighborhood, trembling and scratched by seemingly every tree and bush we passed, we stood staring at each other and, alternately, the woods. Nothing happened afterwards, so we made our way to each of our homes and just agreed to not talk about it. 20 years later, we caught up via phone, and I tried to ask, but before I could get it out, he said, "Yep, I remember. No, I don't ever think about it, and I have no explanation. Let's not revisit." And so it stands, the most unexplainable thing I've ever seen. A few years ago, a friend and I were on a road trip. While following the flow of traffic on the highway, it started to rain amazingly hard out of nowhere. I don't love being in cars, so I was instantly on edge. This increased tenfold when I realized we were behind a big rig with another on his side. I advised him to slow down, probably yelled it. I have a deep, booming voice and lose control of volume when the adrenaline starts flowing. As I finished my sentence, he immediately screamed, "Oh fuck." And I realized we were hydroplaning. We spun like a teacup at Disney. I'm not sure how many times, neither of us do, but it felt like forever. I remember getting hit on my side, spinning some more, getting hit on the back door of his side, spinning, and ending up hitting the guardrail. Oddly enough, we came to a rest in the emergency lane. We both take a moment to assess each other. Me, "Holy shit, are you good, bro?" Him, "Yay, dude. Are you okay? I'm so sorry." Then assess everything outside the car. The semi on our right had stopped 50 yards in front of us. His vehicle seemed fine, but he got out of the cab in a dead sprint towards us. As we got out of the car to see if he was alright, he lost his shit on us. In his words, in a mixture of panic and fury, "What the fuck are you doing? I thought I killed you. I thought I ran you over." All we could really do is apologize and let him yell. We were both kind of shocked and trying to figure out what happened. 5 minutes later, a state police officer arrives, makes sure we are good, check, and the car works, a few dings and a hanging bumper we MacGyvered with what was in his trunk, but check, and gives us a ticket for failing to maintain our lane. Dick move, but he wasn't wrong. We take it slow to the first rest stop we see. We both go a ways away from the entrance and chain smoke a few cigs. As we are talking, an older gentleman and his son, I assume, are approaching us. The first thing we notice is their outfits. The father was dressed in a black and red suit, with a shiny black cane and a matching fedora. He pulled it off flawlessly. The son wasn't as dressed to the nines, but he looked smooth as well. Pop spoke first. "My brothers, is everything alright?" He almost sang with the most genuine smile I've ever seen. We both start to ramble trying to explain, but I don't think anything intelligible was said. He cut us off with, "Fellas, just remember. Materials are replaceable, but this," as he buttons his jacket, then points to his heart, "this you don't get too many chances." He and his son both flashed their smiles. They walked into the rest stop food court as we stood there, stunned. We both instantly got a warm, happy feeling. The shock and fear left with those gentlemen. We had planned on heading back home, 4 hours into a 10-hour drive, but we said, "Fuck it, we need this," and continued on without issue. When I was around 8 to 12 years old, I would always bike down to the park with my 3 close buddies after dinner to play some sports or just chill out on the playground. My friends and I all lived very close together on the top of a hill, with only a few houses between us. The park was about 7 blocks down the hill, and we would usually meet up at one person's place and bike down to the park together. Normally walking to the park would take about 12 to 15 minutes, but when we ride downhill on the bike, we get there in about 2 to 3 minutes at most. So this one month, my friend's grandmother was visiting from out of town. She had a small figure and was almost 70 years old but still had this lively aura about her. She could walk okay but usually used her cane when we went outdoors. Sometimes when we went to the park, she would join us a little later and just take a stroll, admiring flowers or picking up vegetation. I think she uses them for some sort of ointment or occasionally in food prep. I never bothered asking. Nothing unusual so far. Then, on a sunny evening around 7 p.m., the sun sets late in the summer, we all met up at my friend's house with bikes and were about to ride off to the park. His grandma peeks out from inside the house and shouts to us to be careful when riding on the road. She was still doing the dishes, and she told us she will come to the park later. We didn't really give it any second thought and just started riding down to the park. We sped down the hill that day and got to the park in about a minute and a half flat. We were all adrenaline rushed because we don't normally go that fast but just wanted to see how fast we could make it there. Pretty dangerous. Do not attempt. Before we could catch our breath, We looked over to the playground of the park, and all of us were just stunned. My friend's grandma was there, standing by the edge of the playground with her cane in one hand and waving to us with the other. We rode over to her and were about to ask how she got down so fast when she asked, "What took you guys so long?" We all looked at each other for a solid 5 seconds, speechless, before my other friend said, "Holy shit dude, your grandma can teleport." More creepy and unexplainable than anything else. Whenever I tell the story, it's phrased as the time I met a CIA agent. I used to work retail and had been opening that morning. This was at around 7 a.m., so not many people were out and about. I opened the doors at 7:30. At 7:35 a man comes in. He looks frantic. His clothes don't look very well kept. I sort of assumed he was homeless. This sent me a bit on edge, and I honestly thought I was about to get robbed. He comes up to the counter, looks around, and then asks where the bathroom is. At this point, I just assumed that he wanted to shoot up or something. Whatever. Not the first, not the last, and I make it a general rule not to piss off junkies before 10 a.m. So I point him towards the bathroom and go about my day. He heads in there. A few minutes later, 2 men come into the store. They look around, then at me, then towards a car just outside. They don't really say anything to me other than a general hey before starting to look around. Usually, we never get customers that early in the morning. We often start getting customers around 8 a.m., and business picks up around 9 a.m. One of them heads to the bathroom. He tries to open it, and it's locked. I say nothing. They didn't ask me why it was locked or anything. I'm not opening my mouth because, once again, it's before 10 a.m. The 2 of them leave. The guy comes out shortly after. He's dressed in much better clothes, looks somewhat groomed, and even seems to have better posture. He just nods over to me and walks out. I've thought this over at least once a day in the 4 years since I had that job. It wasn't until the next day that things really stood out to me as being really fucking weird. My conclusion is that I watched some sort of spy operation or something, because honestly, that's what it felt like, if these things ever have feelings, that is. As someone who doesn't believe in ghosts, this one continues to baffle me to this day, the old Prescott Lighthouse in Michigan. It was deactivated in the 1800s, and the story goes that one day, despite the fact that no power had been provided to it, it began to turn back on every night. I believe that it has even now been re-registered as a landmark for passing ships so that they know where they are when visibility is low. But wait, it gets weirder. I saw this lighthouse turn on with my very eyes. Standing on a bridge about a mile away, I looked through a pair of binoculars and saw the filament itself burning. You could clearly make out the shape of it. It was exactly like looking into a low-watt bulb. However, when my friend and I hiked along the coast and made our way to the foot of the thing, it was very clearly still off. No light was coming on from the inside, but we had another person on the bridge, his very sweet grandma, with a walkie-talkie, and she swore up and down that it was still on. Even provided pictures. To re-illustrate, I was up close, at an angle where I could see that this thing was giving off zero light as the sun had all but gone down completely, while someone else was able to take pictures of the bulb still burning clear as day. Upon hiking back, the bulb became brighter and brighter the further away we got until it was at its full glory when we were back at the bridge and the sun was completely down. Again, I don't believe in ghosts, but as someone who likes poking holes in stories like these, I do not understand how this could possibly have worked. My brother, a friend, and I were all watching TV in my parents' room back in the 90s because, at the time, we didn't have a family TV. It was the middle of the day in summer, and we were between the ages of 10 and 12 and home alone. The door to the bedroom started rattling, and it looked like the doorknob was turning. Small side note, when I was younger I thought that putting scotch tape on the doorknob would lock the door. It didn't. But ever since there was this remnant of my attempt left on the doorknob. You could vaguely make out where the strips of tape had been. This is how we could see twisting motions. Well, our house was the kind of place where the neighborhood kids would hang out all the time because my parents weren't abusive, they were pretty welcoming, and everyone liked my brother. We also didn't have a working lock on the front door. So we think that maybe one of the other kids in the neighborhood is messing with us. We open the door and search the house without finding anyone. Then we think, maybe it's one of the dogs. But all the dogs are chilling and not paying us attention. We try closing the door with one of us on one side and the other 2 on the other. It still rattles after a couple of seconds of being closed. We switch in case shenanigans are going on. It keeps rattling. We ended up just leaving the door open, and we weren't bothered anymore, but the 3 of us never did figure out what had been going on. As adults we all still remember the experience pretty similarly. Years and years later I was home alone and sleeping in the middle of the day because my job was a graveyard shift. My bedroom door, a different room than before, starts rattling. I wake up shocked and immediately remember the prior instance. I opened the door and went back to sleep. Back when I was 15 in the 90s, we used to hang out in this small wood we called the orchard. It used to be one but was now abandoned land. It was tiny, essentially a 10-meter wide by 15-meter long crop of trees and grass. It was kind of pathetic in retrospect but served as a cool little place to meet up for kids in our village. It was quite common during the summer holidays for a group of 7 of us to just sit there and chat and do things. Surrounding the orchard, there was a visible, open field on one side and a residential estate on the other. One day our group of 7 kids between 11 and 15 were all hanging out by a fence that cut across the entrance to the orchard. This fence went about 2 meters into the wood from the open field, so we basically had the fence, then us, then a small amount of trees, and then an open field. Nothing special was going on, and it was a hot summer's day. We were just talking about video games when we started hearing noises. Short, sharp impacts. Something sounds like it's hitting the trees. This happens once or twice and then calms down when we start paying attention. It stops, and we carry on talking, thinking nothing of it. Then it starts again. Again, short, sharp sounds like something is crashing against the trees. Always a few seconds apart, but with no real rhythm to them. Again, it goes quiet when we start paying attention. Then we see one. A small stone. It bounces off the top of one of the trees and falls down beside us. The 7 of us just stare at it dumbfounded. At first we're convinced that it's another group of kids waging war with us, because that's the age and mentality we're at the time, so we rush out to the field to defend ourselves, but there's no one there. The field is open enough that it's clear no one could really be hiding anywhere. The trees are open enough as it is so we can see most of the field by the fence. There's definitely no one there. We go back to the fence and carry on watching and talking. The stones aren't big enough to hurt if they did hit us. They'd just mildly annoy, if anything. It's more just interesting at this point. Another few happen, and we start to find and collect them as they land. We get about 8 of them, and we can hear others. Then, with no other warning, a large stone about the size of a cup comes crashing down between me and a friend and smacks into the fence, rebounding off it and rolling to the floor. Even at that age we understood that if this had hit us, it would have been bad. The rock is heavy to pick up, and I remember holding it for a few moments. I had to wrap my hand round the rock to do so. At that point we had reached our limit for the day. We left the area via the open field, partly determined to find out who was throwing the rocks and partly just getting out of there. To this day, 20 years later, I still don't know what was going on. The obvious answer is that some idiot was just throwing them at us, but we couldn't see anyone in the field, and there was no other angle for them to throw them at us. At the time, we played with the idea that someone was throwing them from the other side of the fence and they were rebounding off the trees, but we could get to the other side of the fence, and the rest of the orchard there was just as open with no one in sight. While the light stones could be thrown far, that one big heavy rock was heavy enough that you'd have to be pretty close to throw it even as an adult. Basically we were able to view the area enough so that no location within the throwing distance of the large rock would be visible. This is pretty much the one unexplained/slightly paranormal event in my life. It happened in the middle of the day, and the obvious explanations don't appear possible. I happily debunk and am skeptical about everything else in my life and any other paranormal stories I get told, but this remains the one thing that gives me a little pause. I knew my folks were out when I was in high school, so I lay in bed late one day and planned to take a long shower. Left the door open because the bathroom ventilation was crap, and I wanted to do my hair in the mirror afterwards. I hear a woman call out for help. Clear as day near the front of the house, so urgent I dash out starkers, not caring for the towel. Get to the lounge room, and no one is there, which I'm grateful for. Feel the hair on my neck stand up and hear little slaps against the slate floor running away from me up the hallway giggling. The shower door slams shut. Freaked the hell out at this point, I call out for my stepmom and look around, praying she is home and this is a joke. Nothing. Go back up to the shower to wash the conditioner out, and down the lower half of the door was a fading handprint. I noped the hell out of there, turned off the shower, put my clothes on while I was still wet, and fucked off out of the house right then. Walked an hour to my boyfriend's house. There were other occasions with the little kid ghost in that house and a guy ghost at the end of the bed, but this one still freaks me out so bad 15 years on. When I was in college, my major classes were mostly in a building that used to be a hospice but hadn't been used for that purpose in about 15 or 20 years. One day as I was heading back to my dorm after class, an elderly man stopped me. "Excuse me, but do you know where I go to visit patients here? My friend is in the hospice, and I'd like to go see her." I told the man that I was sorry, but the building was no longer a hospice and hadn't been for a while. He seemed disappointed at the news and then asked me, "Do you know where my friend is, then? I'd really like to see her. I haven't seen her in so long." I again apologized and said I wasn't sure where the closest hospice or nursing home might be. I offered to go and ask someone from the town for him, but he declined. He then started to walk off, talking to himself about his friend. I walked a few steps and turned around, thinking I would offer to Google local medical centers for him. But by the time that I turned, the old man had disappeared. It was broad daylight, with no one else nearby, and there was nowhere he could have gone quickly enough to just disappear. He had been walking slowly, like it was a fair amount of effort, so it's not like he would have taken off running. To this day I'm still not sure if he was just a confused old man who didn't know how long the old hospice had been a college building, or if he was some spirit looking to say goodbye to an old friend who had long since passed. I'm a broke college student taking organic chemistry over the summer and trying to save a couple of bucks, so I move into an apartment complex that lets you pay by the month. I have 3 other roommates, we all pretty much ignore each other. Everything is great. Until the second night, when I start to realize that we might actually have a 4th roommate when I hear someone start to pace the hallway and knock on the walls. I asked everyone about it in the morning, and they all said they heard it and assumed it was another one of us. Cool, so our apartment is haunted. Whatever. I can totally deal. Orgo is way scarier than ghosts. One morning, about 9 a.m., I'm sitting in my room, studying before a test, when I hear someone shuffling around in the hall. I look up at my computer screen, which is dark, so I can see the room behind me reflected in the screen. Nobody is walking by my open door. As I watch, the door slams shut, totally on its own. It's summer in SC, so all of the windows were closed, and I distinctly remember that the AC was off. The door just slammed shut. We named the ghost Francis. We thought that was a nice, gender-neutral name. Francis liked to leave kitchen cabinets and drawers open, turn on the showers, and unlock the front door. One time, also during the day, I had lost my keys and was talking out loud to myself as I looked for them. Francis found them first and threw them across the room at me. I moved out after a month of his shenanigans. When I was in HS, my dad had a new employee over for a barbecue dinner. We lived in a nice suburban/rural area. There were housing plans near our home, but our home wasn't part of them. It had been built by my grandfather just before he passed, long before I was born. So it had a nice backside patio and a pool my father had installed. So we were all sitting on the deck, at a picnic table. My dad was cooking on the barbecue and had been sitting next to the new hire, so the new hire and his dog were facing the rear door to my house alone, and my mom and I were on the other side of the table. Suddenly the dog looks at the rear sliding door to my house and lets out a growl. My mother and I look at the dog and the new hire, call him Andy. Andy says, "Linux Mom, don't move, just act normal. Is there anyone else home?" Under his breath. He's wearing sunglasses, and he's looking at the sliding glass door out of the corner of his eyes. I'm going to get up in a minute and go to my car. I have a car phone, yes, this was long ago, and I'm going to call the police. My mother asks him to describe the man, and he pretty much says it looks like Linuxange's father but about 1 foot shorter and wearing an old-style baseball cap. My mother laughs at this and says that sounds just like my grandfather while turning around to look. And he says the guy just vanished as my mother turned around. And goes on to tell him lots of people have thought my father was home and came to see him when he wasn't, etc., and it's just my grandfather's ghost. Keep in mind this was our first meeting with Andy, and my father, to this day, has never spoken about his father, even to me. I've learned 100% about him from my relatives because my father was away at university when he died in an accident, and my father, to this day, can't bring himself to talk about it. Andy was also kind of nervous, like new hire nerves, so doing this for a funny would make 0 sense. Anyway, the house was checked because my dad didn't like that, and my dad doesn't believe in that kind of shit, etc. But, at that moment, I recalled several older memories from when I was younger. Once I was late to a sports match, and my dad was supposed to come home from work and take me, and he was late. While my mother was helping me put on my uniform, I saw my dad walk up the sidewalk. But he wasn't home. I was absolutely sure I saw him and ran outside, but he wasn't there. Came about 10 minutes later. And when I was even younger, I was playing out by our shed, and a neighbor came over and yelled at my mom, "Stop lying. I need to talk to Linuxange's dad," and I just fucking saw him walking up your front sidewalk into the house. I remember my mom crying and saying he really wasn't there, and the neighbor puffed off. Anyway, those were all at daytime. A few things happened around my house later when I was older and back from uni, but that was at night, lol. This isn't what I experienced personally, but I thought I'd share. Something I haven't forgotten is what my mom said to me last year. It's something I never knew, but the only things I do remember when I was a kid were that my grandma got very sick and eventually passed away. This was about 26 years ago. Then last year my mom revealed a lot of details that were eerie, spiritual, and sad. I would write those in detail, but it'd take a long time to write. But one thing I could never forget was what she said: "I miss my mom. When y'all were little, she passed away. I was so depressed I didn't want to be around anyone or anything. When you were in school, I would cry and cry at home because I missed her terribly. I would go for weeks grieving. Until one noontime, I fell asleep on the couch. I had a rocking chair in front of me. Anyway, in my dream, I was in limbo. I saw a human figure, but I could barely see that figure. I couldn't move or anything. The environment was dark and eerie. Almost foggy, like mist everywhere. But there was a barely lit above the human figure. But I'd see that figure would be coming towards me. Floating in a chair. It was my mom. She was dressed in ragged clothes, and her skin was an ashen color. She was rocking back and forth in a chair. I saw her head lifted up and that she was facing me, but her eyes were lifeless. But she spoke in her natural voice, echo-like, telling me, "My daughter, do not weep for me. I am at peace. At last I am no longer in pain. I am with the Lord. You'll be okay. You have your sons. Live for them." I opened my eyes and felt unusual and uncomfortable. I didn't get up, but I moved my eyes around the room because I was a bit confused about where I was. Then I looked at the clock. It was around 1 p.m. Then I looked straight ahead and noticed the rocking chair moving as if someone just sat on it and got up from it. I was by myself, and y'all were still in school. There's this ghost we call Edward. We thought he was attached to the house. Until I left for college, and my roommates would tell me they would see a man standing in the doorway, and it scared them, but they would laugh about it because they thought they were dreaming. In high school, many times coming home from hanging out with friends, I'd see my dad in the window waiting for me to get home. But when I'd walk in, he'd either still be at work or asleep. I have a bad pain disease called CRPS, and it's super painful. Many days and nights spent in bed crying my whole life. No matter the time of day, I could feel a hand touch mine or rub my back or leg. My leg is what is affected. Used to freak me the hell out, but obviously Edward wasn't there to hurt me. I had a deaf friend come hang out with us at my house one time, and he texted me and my mom saying, "You have a ghost, right?" A few times I could see him pretty vividly, sitting on the couch or standing in my doorway. The family dog would be sitting on the couch, obviously enjoying pets and scratches with no one in the room. My own dog does that now that I've moved out and am living with my boyfriend in an apartment. More recently I had a few things happen. I had taken some medicine and laid down for a nap around 3 in the afternoon. My BF was at work. I felt someone shake me awake, and in the process I heard dogs 4 people, "Wake up." I jumped awake thinking my BF was home or something, but instead heard someone trying to come into my apartment. It was someone trying to get in who got scared off when they heard me say, "Baby, is that you?" My mom thinks it's my great-grandfather that I never got to meet. But honestly we don't know. He only shows up every so often now instead of all the time. My best friend will text occasionally and ask me to call Ed, "Don't show me you're here," and hasn't seen him since. She will feel like someone is there sometimes, but that's it. But yeah, smile, it's some man who used to be in the military, and an old uniform is all I can make out. Once or twice I thought I saw jeans, but I don't know if it's my brain playing tricks because I'm not sure spirits can change their appearance like that. It's creepy/scary but also comforting. Mostly scary for people close to me not used to it, hearing things bump around or my dog acting like she's getting pets with no one around, or seeing him out of the corner of their eye. But he's for sure not here to hurt me, so I'm not too worried about it anymore. Rented a house that was built in the early 1800s. It was in a small coastal town in Maryland, where everyone knew everyone, except me and my roommate. We just moved in. The landlord was in his mid-70s, he and his wife had just purchased the home a few years earlier as an investment. We were the first tenants for them as they were fixing it up due to it falling into disrepair over the years. We were in the home a few weeks when it became apparent that the locals always asked, "So, you like living there?" It seemed odd, because it was a nice corner lot, well landscaped, with an up-to-date kitchen and renovations, a private backyard with wrought iron fencing around the front, and very picturesque. The front of the home had old mortar walls and very old, distressed yet refinished wood floors. The middle of the home was actually an addition built around 1950, and the final addition, a large family room and bathroom, was built in 1981. On the second floor were the 3 bedrooms, one in each section of the house, with a staircase that started in the kitchen, middle section, first floor, and led to the first bedroom in the front section of the house on the second floor. Only one neighbor was actually friendly to us, a woman in her early 50s, a widow, and she lived alone. We asked why everyone was asking if we liked living there. She said, matter-of-factly, it's been abandoned for years, things happen there, no one wants to live there. We were like, WTF? I asked what happened, and she said back when she was little, a boy with mental and physical issues died in the house. Families lived there off and on till the mid-80s, then it was left unoccupied. The thing is, nobody stayed there long, they all seemed to just move out after a few months, maybe a year at the most. We were the first since the early 80s, and this was around 96. We never noticed anything, mostly because we were never home, working during the day and then going out at night. We weren't homebodies hanging out. Then, after about 6 to 7 months of living there, my roommate came into my bedroom late one night and asked if I had just woken up. He said I was sleepwalking and stood in his doorway. I was never asleep, I was reading a book. Our rooms were at each end of the house, his at the front, mine at the back. I asked, what did you see? He said it was a shadow of someone in his doorway, and it backed away when he addressed it, thinking it was me. We both freaked. We searched the house, and every door was still locked from the inside. We searched everywhere, windows too. All locked shut. I blew it off as he was just seeing things, he did as well. A week or so later, I was getting ready for work, it was 7 a.m. when there was knocking on my bedroom door. Incessant, loud, aggressive knocking, banging actually. I was pissed. WTF. Open the fucking door. The banging continued as I was approaching the door, cussing at what I thought was my roommate. As soon as I grabbed the doorknob and opened the door, the banging stopped and no one was there. I mean, within a second. This happened 2 more times to me that same week, both in the morning. My roommate saw the shadow person one more time, but this time it was in the doorway of the 3rd addition of the house. He saw a black shadow move through the kitchen to the back part of the house and just dissipate. We contacted the landlord, but he knew nothing and honestly didn't seem to care. We spoke to the woman across the street and told her what was happening, and she said a family once before had similar complaints about banging on the walls and doors. But also someone or something grabbing their kids and actually leaving bruises. Everyone thought it was possibly child abuse, but the family moved out rather quickly. We get a notice in the mail after living there about 8 months that the landlord passed away and his son is selling the property. We need to move out ASAP. He sent our security deposit and first month's rent back to us as compensation for the short notice. My only paranormal experience in my life. It happened around 10 years ago. I worked in a really old building that was mostly unoccupied except for the basement, where my office was, and the ground floor, where there were a couple more offices. The building was 8 stories high, and most of the unoccupied floors still had old furniture/beds, etc., in them from when it used to be student-doctor accommodation. However, on the 7th floor, we kept a lot of our older files in filing cabinets. The whole building was locked at all times, and you needed a programmed security badge to get in and to get onto each floor. One day, my boss asked me and another girl to retrieve some files from the 7th floor. I can't remember what they were or why they were needed, but there were a lot of ghost stories about the building, so neither of us was too happy about being sent. So we're up there looking through filing cabinets and chatting, and we hear what sounds like a man clearing his throat/coughing from down the hallway. Donna and I are frozen, and we stare at each other for a few seconds before I shout, "Hello?" To no answer. After another few seconds pass, we decide we were probably being silly and get on with getting the files. A few minutes pass, and we're feeling okay again until we hear a man's voice, kind of weakly and more distant than the previous coughing sound, shout, "Hello?" Again we're frozen. No one but us has access to these floors. It was my job to program the badges, so I knew exactly who had access, and they were not accessible by the public or homeless. The only way in was with a security card. Donna and I swiftly left and went back to our office to inform our boss, who decided to go check it out for himself. While he was gone, I checked the access point on the system, and no one but me had swiped in. Then I saw my boss's card showing up as being used as he was up there checking it out for us. He returned several minutes later, saying the whole floor was completely empty with no sign of life in any of the rooms. That building is due to be demolished soon. Back in May or June 1998, my family and I were at my nanny's house, clearing some stuff out. She lived right on the water in Rhode Island. Small home, 1 floor, kind of cramped floor plan. She always sat in the kitchen at the island, in front of the fridge, and blocked the way to the hall/bath/bedrooms. She had just passed away a couple months earlier, in April, from a stroke. My parents were loading up my younger sisters, and I was the last one to the car, standing in the kitchen, which has a clear view down the hall into the bathroom. As I started to walk out the door, I heard the water faucet turn on, full force. As in, total silence, and then someone turns the water on. Confused, as if someone is still in the house, I call out. When no one answers, I go to the bathroom and investigate. Seeing the water on, I turn it off, thoroughly creeped out. This was in the middle of the day, maybe 2 or 3 p.m. I remember the smell of the toothpaste she used to use, the sun coming in through the stained glass window, and the bar of soap next to the toothbrush as I turned it off. Promptly ran out to the car because my parents were annoyed that I was taking so long. I told them, but no one believed me. I wish I got to know you better and helped you feel less lonely, non. ETA, other creepy things included my mom hiring a psychic to come so she could try and talk with her parents. The psychic ended up talking with me about a good friend that died in a car accident. She said, he says, "Thank you for hugging my mom." That shit freaked me the fuck out and still does to this day. I didn't once feel comfortable hugging his mom throughout the mourning period, but I finally did a few months after he passed away. No one knew about this. No one. And I was trying to keep my answers to simple yes/no so I wouldn't feed the narrative. That psychic was spot fucking on with everything. After moving in with a friend of mine in late April, I constantly heard sounds like there was a medium-sized animal or kid bumping around in the closet in the room I stayed in. There would be a small bump, like someone shifting their weight on a creaky floor and maybe falling forward and pushing off the wall. I would pause to listen closer, and nothing would happen. I have gone in the walk-in closet multiple times and jumped up and down and walked around and tried to replicate the noise to no effect. Most times I would go back to what I was doing, then it would happen much louder. A crash like a person falling off of a bed into the wall, and I would jump and get chills down my spine. After that I would say, "Hey, I have to stay here until late July, so please just relax, it's okay." Usually it would stop after that. But one particular time, about a month ago, a third increase in intensity happened that was the first time in my life that I completely froze instead of having a fight or flight response. I forgot to tell it everything was fine and I wouldn't be here for too much longer, and it got louder and just kept going like someone was thrashing around in the closet like a chained animal. I stood up and said, "Hey, please tolerate me just a little while longer, and I'll leave you be." It stopped for a second, then another big bump, followed by a few more that genuinely sounded like rage. I was past scared and somehow arrived at the emotional response of annoyed and chastised the noise by screaming, "Shut the fuck up, I am focused on this game right now, and you're throwing me off. Your tantrum is achieving nothing but annoying the shit out of me. Fuck off and bother someone that actually cares." Not a single noise since. I dare say it's the quietest closet I've ever had the pleasure of sleeping beside. Way back in the day, I lived 14 miles from town and 40-ish miles from the city. Needless to say, it was the middle of goddamn nowhere. In the middle of a sunny summer's day, my sister and I were playing Twisted Metal 4 in my bedroom, which faced east. We could see the driveway, 10 feet from the window, and the field, roughly 50 feet from the window. We were 11 or 12 years old. We looked out my window, and there was a man digging in the field right next to our dog kennel, which had our Cocker Spaniel, and the dog wasn't reacting to him, which was extremely weird. The man was wearing an orange shirt under a pair of blue denim overalls. We had a lot of problems with our neighbor, who would do weird things like this all the time without asking and clearly being on our property, so we tried to get his attention. We tried yelling to him and the dog both, but neither budged. I grabbed my pellet gun and went outside, spooked out of my mind but set on protecting my sister. I went outside, and I crept around trying to find him. I was flush with adrenaline, with this man nowhere to be seen. I kept feeling eyes on me and a sharp fear. I made my way to the other side of my window, and he was nowhere to be seen. I kept asking my sister where he went, but she kept pointing to the same empty spot. She could still see him clear as day, now watching me. I couldn't see him at all but felt intense fear. I ran inside, and we each grabbed a sword and the pellet gun. We could see him again, just staring at us from the field. Eventually, we went out to confront him together, sword in her hands and gun in mine. We trounced our fears and marched with a mob mentality over to where he was, but there was nothing. No man, no hole or dirt pile, and none of the field was bent or looked walked through at all. We went back inside and searched the entire house, called our mom, and sat literally back to back until our mom came home several hours later. This happened last year in northwest Germany, near the Dutch border. For you who do not know, there are no natural predators in that part of Germany. I was on my way back home. I had been doing some shopping in a nearby town about 12 kilometers away. I had taken my bike, but time had gotten away from me, and it was nearing sunset. It was a straight shot back to my town. The road ran through woods and farmland the entire way. There is also a dike that runs parallel to the road for part of the way, and the dike is covered in dense forest. Well, I had been biking for about 15 minutes when the sun really started to set. I was going at a pretty quick pace because my muscles were burning. I saw something just within the tree line to my left. It was just a glance, but it was big, and it was moving. My first thought was, it's a wolf, but having been to France many times and having seen wolves, the shape was not right. It was big and bulky but kind of lanky. I was really freaked out. Whatever it was running with me just inside the tree line. The sun was continuing to set, and eventually I couldn't see very well, and when I was about 2 kilometers away from my town when I heard crashing through the field to my left. At this point the sun was almost completely gone. The entire way the hair on the back of my neck was raised, and as soon as I crossed the threshold into the town, I finally felt I could slow down. I looked back, and there was nothing there. This was the scariest I have ever been thus far in my life. Maybe it is just me who is the only one out past dark in my town, because the entire way I saw nobody. I only lived there 2 months out of the year, so I'm not well acquainted with the community. But any thoughts on what it was or could be? The only thing I know is all the other times I have been in those woods, I have never been scared, never even heard another sound out of place. There have been more than a few instances in my life that I've had creepy shit happen, but this one is one I'll always remember as the scariest. 3 years ago my parents rented a house in the Bay Area, and I was staying with them while I finalized plans on my and my partner's new home. The house had 2 bedrooms that were built with the house and 1 additional room, added on later, which I was staying in. Now when we moved all their stuff into the garage, we noticed the family before us had built a small mezzanine with a wooden ladder on the wall attached to the house. On the ladder's rungs in green marker is messy writing that says "Come on up," with an arrow pointing to the top of the mezzanine. And if you climb up there, there's a wooden door in the side of the wall in front of the ladder that was also obviously added on after the house was built. On the door is written "Kids Secret Room." The door leads to the attic space. Just to clarify, this is not a room but just the space in the roof where all the insulation goes. I remember thinking, why would kids play here? And I got a really weird feeling from that door, like something was waiting just out of sight. That night as I was setting up my room, I noticed a hatch in the roof of my closet and got weirded out again. Turns out it's connected to the attic space behind the mezzanine door in the garage. It reminded me of the closet hatch in the Grudge movie, so I stacked a bunch of old file boxes under it so that it was covered up and forgot about it. Flash forward to later that week, I was getting beers from the garage fridge. I didn't bother to turn on the light in the garage, so once the fridge was closed, I was basically in the dark to walk the 4 feet back to the door to the house. And I felt that weird prickly feeling on the back of my neck like you get when you know someone's watching you. I turned to look, and even though I couldn't see anything in the dark, I got the feeling there was something small crouching behind my mom's car watching me, and it was malicious. So I noped right back around and walked as calmly as I could back to the door, and right when I turned the handle, I felt something bump one of the bottles I was holding in my other hand. I fucking jumped through that door and slammed and locked it and didn't go in there again all night. It's been 2 years since I moved out, and that door and the garage freaked the absolute fuck out of me to this day. My nieces are living with them there now, and they won't go near the garage either. I was sent to retrieve a pot from my cousin's car, and this was around 3:45 p.m. I'm like, alright, no problem, right? Well, I go outside, and I hear footsteps on our gravel driveway, and I just think, the fuck? And then I see her passenger car door open and close on its own and more footsteps. I hauled ass inside and didn't leave my room the rest of the day. Another event happened in front of my whole family. We had this shelf in our kitchen that had random stuff on it, including a bottle of medicine for our dog. Well, I'm walking by the shelf, and the bottle, a good 4-ish inches from the edge of the counter, flies off and nearly hits me. I'm confused and turn around, and my sisters are staring at me wide-eyed, and I just go, "That was thrown at me, wasn't it?" And they just nod, and it freaked us TF out. I've been scratched loads of times too, but only once had blood been drawn, which scared the hell out of me. The last event worth mentioning wasn't in the middle of the day but at 1 a.m. in December of 2016. We were moving, and it was the day before we left. I'm staying up on my phone cause why not, and I'm like, alright, I'm gonna sleep now. And it's pitch black. There was a sliding door with some stained plastics on some hooks and suction cups. Well, 20 seconds after I turn my phone off, I hear this clicking sound, and I'm like, what the hell is happening? But write it off as the wind outside moving the plaques. And then, it stops immediately. I'm now terrified, and my eyes are adjusting now to the darkness. I risk looking, and right as I see it, it starts up again, and it's even worse than before, to the point where it's hanging by one hook and slamming into the window. And then it abruptly stops again. I'm in literal tears from terror and barely sleep. The next morning I tell my sister, and she's like, no way. I'm like, on God, I know what I saw and heard. Now at this time, I thought the plaque was on the outside of the door. And my sister goes, hey grandma, the plaque fell off the hook. And my grandma is all like, oh, that happens. And places it back up. It wasn't on the outside. I watched a holeless poltergeist play with a plaque that I thought was outside. I turned white as a sheet and nearly fainted. Here's a little backstory. My mom and I were house sitting for family friends. This house was a cabin in the woods type of house with huge windows on one side. My friend was there too. We were both 14 at the time, about 7 years ago. Next to the house, on the side with the giant windows, there was a stretch of heathland. I'm not sure if this is the right translation. It's like a dry, sandy patch of land with bushes and heather flowers, and then just dark pine forests. I look out the window, as I was the only one facing it at the time, and I see something run by and disappear behind a tree. It looks like a small child with one of those Christmas elf hats on, only white. Their clothes, a blouse and pants, are also white. The hat was trailing behind them as they ran. I couldn't see many details, but it did look like just a happy child running. The tree it vanished behind was way too thin to properly hide a kid, though. I jumped up and said, I saw a child. It hid behind the tree. My mom, who's never a skeptic about anything, said, sit down, I have seen it too. She explained that earlier that week she'd also seen what she called a spirit on the heathland too. Now here's the weird shit. We hadn't talked about what it looked like other than a child, so my friend suggested we'd both go to a different room and draw what we saw, and then we'd know if we saw the same thing. Comparing the drawings, we'd drawn the exact same thing. A child, long white elf hat with a thing on the end, white blouse, wide white trousers, happy face, running. We called the family friends whose house we were in, and the woman explained that she knows it, small with all white clothes on, and that it meant no harm. We haven't seen it since, but the tree it disappeared behind was a tree the couple had planted for their wedding. I think maybe it's a spirit of that forest, someone who died there or something, and who is now just chilling and enjoying the love this couple has for its forest. I was going to my upstairs bathroom once when I was in high school, and I heard an incredibly loud banging coming from outside the room. Now, we shared the side of our house as the wall for our neighbor's backyard, so I thought it was them doing work near our wall, again. So, I was just about to leave when suddenly I noticed two human-sized hands pounding on the skylight above the bathtub. Frightened, I go out and ask my mom if anyone was working on the roof, since that was the first thing I thought of as a rational explanation. She answered no, so I told her, well, someone's on the roof. She went outside, and I stayed inside to check, but the hands vanished and the pounding stopped instantly and without a trace of escape. I knew it couldn't be a burglar because they'd have to be stupid to try and break in on a summer afternoon with the car in the driveway, plus I would have heard them run off the roof. So I thought it might have been an animal, but the hands were distinctly human, and the banging was far too loud and aggressive for a little critter to be bouncing on my roof. The last thing I did was check it from behind my house in the cold ASAC behind us, just to see if someone might be hiding on the other side of the roof. The thing is, our chimney blocks your view if you look directly at it, so you could hide there. But, when I tried to get a better look from the sides, there were gardeners blocking me from getting to both angles. I never saw if anything was behind the chimney, but the hands haven't shown up ever since. So this happened in 2007 when I was in 8th grade. Mid-afternoon. I was inside my 6th period English/language arts, whatever it was called, class doing silent reading, something we always did for the first 15 or 20 minutes of that class. It's silent. Our desks are tables we share, not individual desks, and they are configured in a way that people are sitting in all different directions around the room. We sat in squeaky, plastic chairs. From where I'm sitting, there's a fairly large aisle to the back of me, separating me and another table. If I'm facing east, the people at the shared table behind me are facing north and south. Again, it's completely silent, with no chairs or desks squeaking or moving, no whispering, and a page turning here and there, but it's silent. I don't remember if I was absorbed in a book or thinking about something else, but I felt a hand press down on my right shoulder from behind me and a voice whisper my name in my left ear. I felt the breath of the whisper on my ear and my neck. It startled me, of course. It happened 1 second, and the next, I had quickly and instinctively whipped around in my seat to see the table behind me quietly reading, not noticing me. No one was shifting in their seats or getting back into them, no one was trying to suppress laughter, and no one was looking up from their books. They were genuinely consumed in their reading. I looked around the room, and the rest of my class was the same way. I studied the width of the aisle between the table of my classmates behind me and me. There was really no way anyone could have gotten up without making the chair squeak, put their mouth close to my ear, and gotten back to their seat and composed themselves back into their book without a sound and within less than a second. I'm not religious or spiritual, and I wasn't then either. I don't and have never believed in the paranormal. All I can assume is I had a very real hallucination. I wish I knew what it was called. I've never had anything like that happen to me before or since.